We're still gonna have to hit the intro.
Sit up on the couch.
All right.
With the dope doctor.
Now?
Hey, Louie. Hey, Louie.
Yo, get on the couch. Shut up and sit down.
Hey, welcome everybody to the Couch Live. Here we are at WOKB 1680 AM here in Orlando. For those of you that are watching it out of Orlando, other people that are watching it online, you may be watching it on YouTube Live, you may be watching it on Facebook Live. I don't know. There's all different kinds of ways to watch it. I am the street certified dope Dr. Louis Delgado here with you for the last 23 years and counting, along with my partner, Dharma Guy, Trinity Phillips. What's up, brother?
Hey, what is up?
Good, man. It's interesting doing it this way now, coming into the radio station, right? And then having
Yeah.
our producer. What's going on, man? How you doing? Look at that. Look, he even has the Couch Live written on there and everything now.
I know. I'm trying my best. I was trying to get it in just the way you like.
Yeah,
I like the
you're
fact
doing
that he's
good.
got the camera working this week, man. Look at that.
Yeah, Shaw's got he's got it all working now.
I know. We right there in the mix. Look at you though. Look at you. You got the whole microphone and everything. Now look at you.
Yeah, man. Well, you
Sure.
know. Oh, it's because I'm not at the hotel today. That's right. You're right. Last week I did the show from down in Boca. That's the beautiful thing about it, being able to do it like this, people. I was down at Boca moving our daughter out of her sophomore year from FAU. She's back home for the summer, and then we graduated. My other daughter, Dahlia, graduated UCF. That was phenomenal.
Yeah.
That was this weekend on Mother's Day weekend. Family was in town. My beautiful mom was in town, celebrating all the women. It was great. So hopefully, whoever you have in your life, you celebrate it as well. To all the mothers out there, many of you deserve some props. Now, some of you not so much, but at least ours do. Because there's got to at least, right? Well, I'm just saying there's got to at least be one that somebody out there saying, you know what, not my mother. She doesn't deserve anything, right? There's got to be the one, right, Trinity?
Hey, spread the love. It's always not my dad, so I'm all right with saying not my mom as well. Like,
right. At least
like, there are, yes, you were right. There are definitely some not so good mothers out there.
Right.
But there's a lot of good ones too.
Yeah. I mean, you didn't get the positive end of the stick on the dad department, but you did really well in the mother department, Trinity.
I did. She made up for it.
Yeah. What about you, Shaw? Good both of them or just one of them?
Well, I had, my father died at an early age, so for me, it worked out good because while I had the time to spend with him, it was great, and always had my mom around. So I'm grateful for both ends, through the good and the bad. I was telling the students, man, it wasn't until I was about maybe 13 that I really learned how to appreciate my mom for who she was and all the things that she did. So,
isn't that how old were you?
About 13.
Were you when you figured it? Oh, brother, I was older. I was like 19.
But isn't that how it works though? We don't appreciate it until we get much older.
Yeah,
and then we really appreciate it when we have our own kids, and then we start to realize, like, wow, this sucks.
But see, mine was a little different because my mom had just picked me up from somewhere, and that was the first time that somebody picked up a brick and threw it at my mom. Just some random dude picked up a brick and just threw it at my mom. And
I need a little context here. Like, what do you mean they picked up? Like, what?
Just some random dude on the street identifying my mom as one of his girlfriends or whatever. I don't know, but my man just picked up a brick and just threw it, and it hit my mom dead center in the back.
Holy cow, that's horrible.
It was, but my mom turned around, picked it back up, threw it right back at his head, and me and my mom outside working the So that's when I learned how to appreciate my mom. I mean, and it was I'm sorry I had to go through that, but I appreciated it.
Wow.
All right.
All I had to do is grow up. Yeah, just grow up and mature a little bit and just see that, I was the problem. So anyway, welcome everybody. Like I said, to the Couch Live, and you know what? We're at WOKB 1680 AM here every Monday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Like I said, you might be watching us on what, Trinity? What are all the things that people watch?
Well, if they're watching us live right now, we're on the Dope and Dharma Facebook as well as the Dope and Dharma YouTube. And then they're listening, I believe they're listening to WOKB 1680 AM or 100.7 FM.
Okay. And of course, if they want to make any comments or anything like that, feel free to do so. If you have something to say, just we love your interaction. Your interaction just makes it easier for us to make sure that we talk about the stuff that's actually triggering in your mind as we say things, right? And today, let's see, we're doing the Couch Live edition of Dope and Dharma, by the way.
That's right.
And this Couch Live edition, we're going to be talking about self-medicating. Self-medicating, Trinity. Have any
I
of
think
us
we have
ever
phone lines too, don't we?
self-medicated?
Don't forget the phone line, by the way.
Oh, that's right. We do have a phone line. I forget when I'm not at the studio.
Exactly. That's
right.
why I
Right,
reminded
right.
you. That's going to
Shaw,
be
Shaw, go ahead and
Shaw's
shout
fault.
out the phone line.
If you want to call in and talk in, that's 407-894-1680. Again, that number is 407-894-1680. You like that?
I love
There you go.
I love that Shaw voice.
Right?
Yeah. Right on, man. So anyway, so you can call in. You could do it however you like. That's right. Because like this,
if you're
our man
live.
Dexter and people like that can still call us.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're live, if you're calling that number, like if you're watching this like some other time, and you call in and it's not us, you just tell them you're looking for the dope doctor and the Dharma guy anyway. I just think that'd be funny. Is it just go, is this Dope and Dharma? And there'd be some other show going like, what?
No, who are you?
We're praying right now. What are you talking about? Anyway, let's get back to self-medicating behavior. So Trinity,
Yes, sir.
First thing that comes in mind when I say self-medicating behavior.
As far as what they're using, or what I think it is, or what do you mean?
And
what
comes
context?
in your mind? Just when I say it, what's the first thing that immediately
First
comes
thing
in
that pops in my mind is people dealing with some stuff, not knowing how, so they reach to something outside themselves. That's the first thing that pops in my mind. Is
right. Yeah, that's good. Shaw, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when I say self-medicating?
Being your own pharmacist.
Oh, look at that.
Nice.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's talk about being your own. A lot of times we're like our own judge and jury, right? Or at least we would like to play judge and jury to somebody else. Well, today we're talking about being your own physician and pharmacist. So what are some of the things, Shaw, that you've experienced? And if you don't want to get too personal, that's fine. You can leave the personal stuff to us if you want to. But what are some of the things that you found yourself in your life that as you went through it, you experienced a certain emotion, and because of that emotion or thought process, you said, I'm going to medicate myself?
It wasn't necessarily I've always hurt myself, whether it's playing sports, just being out on the streets, doing anything crazy. So I've never really had that type of self-medication. My type of self-medication was, man, just some soap, some peroxide and alcohol, throw some tissue on it, and
rub some tussin on it.
Right. We had this mouthwash called Dr. Titian, and I used Dr. Titian for everything. It wasn't just mouthwash, because it was like 99.999% proof, and it was a mouthwash.
Wow.
If I had gum problem, Dr. Titian. If I had a burn or something on the leg,
it worked.
Dr. Titian. It worked.
All right.
Yeah.
I got you. But you,
that was self-medicated on my end.
Yeah, whatever was necessary. I mean, obviously, we're going to get into more probably emotional stuff rather than actual physical ailments. But what about an emotional one for you, Trinity? Have you ever I know you've never smoked pot. I know that you weren't much of a drinker, but there's other ways to self-medicate, right?
Yeah. I mean, the only thing I could probably think of that I've done at some point in my life would be emotional eating. Turn into some sort of a food or beverage that I enjoyed. Because you're right, I never really did drugs and alcohol. I mean, I did alcohol, but not to that extent.
Right.
So yeah, for me, it would probably have to be food. Exercise. I've definitely been dealing with something, and maybe instead of coming at it head on, I'd go to the gym and work out some of my frustrations instead. You can argue if that's healthy or unhealthy. Food obviously would be unhealthy. The working out, if I'm avoiding things and not really addressing them, then yes, it would be unhealthy. If I'm using it as a distraction so I don't do some more damage to come back later, then obviously that's a healthy way.
I definitely think you're picking some good ones there. I'm sure there's a lot of listeners today, a lot of people that watch this that have used food as a matter of fact. There's no advertisement, but look.
Oh, Lay's potato. Where's your hot sauce at?
Oh, come on now. You're never going to see one without the other, Trinity. You're never going to see Lay's potato.
Hold on. I got to say, all these years that we've been doing this together, It's been what, 10, 11, 12 years that we've been doing this, and you've been
Yeah.
talking about Tabasco and Lay's since I've known you, and I have yet
Yeah.
to even try it. Just want to put that
What?
out there. Yeah, I
What?
have yet to
Wait a minute.
try
Are
it.
you serious?
What?
100%. You've talked about it ad nauseum, and you make it
Wow.
sound so delicious, and yet I
Oh,
have
let me tell you
never
something,
tried
brother.
it.
Let me tell you something.
That's
Let me tell
man.
you something.
Wait,
Trinity?
Shaw, have you
Hey,
tried it?
well, let me do.
Yes,
Well,
sir.
wait.
Yeah, I've never had it.
Amen. Amen. Well, wait a minute. First of all, this is a trigger warning, people. I should say it's a trigger warning because if that happens to be your drug of choice, like it is my drug of choice, Lay's potato chips and Tabasco sauce. I mean, if my mother were here, she would tell you that it was the one constant I've had probably since 5 years old. Who knows how old I was? And she would get me. She'd go to the PX. You ever go to the PX? So the PX is like the military base.
Oh yeah, I've been to one of those.
Where you get all right. So the big bags, not this little. This is like a chump bag right here. This is like a single serving bag. Really,
That used to
my
be
mom
the
would get that big-
25-cent bag or the 59-cent bag.
Exactly. My mom would get that big old bag and like 2 or 3 bottles of
family
Tabasco
size.
sauce every week, man. Just to make sure that her son Louis was. And still, I didn't think that she loved me. Yet she would buy me 3 big bags and 3 bottles of Tabasco sauce every week, and I still questioned her love for me. How ridiculous is that? But anyway, so yeah, so on the serious note, yeah, sometimes we eat to medicate ourselves. We don't like the way we're feeling. We're feeling bored. A lot of boredom causes eating. I think there was a lot of
Yeah.
people during COVID that were experiencing
Yeah.
boredom. They were experiencing other types of feelings of just inactivity and just anxiety from just like what can we do? What can I? And
And believe it
probably
or not,
ate
there's a
more.
disorder. There's a disorder.
But-
You can't
but-
watch TV without eating.
Okay,
Yeah,
I
there's
believe that.
people that is an actual thing where they cannot
believe
watch
that.
TV without grazing on something.
Yeah, I believe that. I mean,
Is it because that you're trying to keep the attention so you don't fall asleep on what you're watching?
No, I think it's just our bodies are designed to want food, man. I mean, that's just how it is.
Yeah.
Our systems don't realize that there's like a grocery store in every corner. So, it's like a weird psychological thing where your body kind of knows it can mindlessly consume at that point, so it triggers those things inside of you to go do that.
Yeah, and the problem with food is that you don't see the immediate effects. I mean, you may feel it after you eat. Like after you eat, you may feel shame, you may feel guilt, you may feel bloated, you may feel some sort of uncomfortability or whatever. But you don't see that immediate gordura. You know what I mean? You don't see the fat just automatically growing on you while you eat. It's not like mood altering substances like drugs and alcohol. You feel it immediately. Pretty much, you know what I mean? Like
Right.
pills and things like that. You feel it so fast. So as a self-medicating thing, yeah, it's still soothing you and the chemistry is still going, but the negative effects are rather delayed. And so you can almost like ignore the negative effects thinking, well, how bad can it really be? Whereas, things like whether you smoke pot, whether you drink alcohol, whether you do more destructive measures like cocaine, crack, meth, heroin, opiates, benzos, anything like that, it's a little bit more immediate and it's a little bit more destructive. And yet the way we all get there is relatively similar. Some
Yep.
of you out there have suffered some very serious pains, and depending on how serious that pain is, depends on how much medication you actually need. Now, when I say all this stuff about medication, we're not talking about from the sense of a legal physician diagnosing you with something and prescribing you something, even though we know a lot of people get to some really bad places, even through legal prescriptions. I'm talking about self-medicating behavior. I'm talking about if you yourself diagnose yourself with just, not being able to deal with a sexual trauma that may have happened to you, some depressed thoughts and some angry thoughts, or maybe some loss that you've experienced, maybe some ill emotions based on some words that people have used against you, and maybe you have these self-defeating thoughts about yourself and you don't feel good about yourself. And when you use substances, you forget about it. You don't think about it. Like Trinity, when people used to ask me why I would get high, to me it was a rather stupid question because it was because I like it. I mean, that was a simplistic answer, right?
Right.
But in reality, as I got older and as I got more mature and understood my own behavior more and my own way of thinking a little bit more, I was able to kind of look at the patterns a little bit and kind of see, well, I just never really felt like I belonged to anything. I always felt different, always felt odd. And it wasn't that I didn't have people, didn't have friends, didn't have family, didn't have love. I had all of that stuff. But there was something internally in me that based on the insecurities that I was feeling within myself, it made it difficult for me to accept the kindness or the words or the positive energy that was coming at me. I always questioned it, always thought there was an angle to it, always thought that there was a lie behind it, and just never felt comfortable. And when you don't feel comfortable, you tend to look for a way to feel comfortable. Now, you, Trinity, you found lifting weights, maybe doing some risky behaviors and things like that. Yeah. Shaw, you played some sports. Well, to me, I found it in different maladaptive behaviors. I started with shoplifting and stealing, and then selling stuff, and then the selling stuff got me into selling other kind of stuff, and then it got me into using stuff, and then it got more violent and more out of hand. But it was just pretending, really, initially, just not to be the person I was, because I didn't like who I was. And sometimes that's how we start self-medicating, right? We just don't like where we're at. We don't like who we are at the moment. Now, we may take it deeper, because as a kid, you hear kids say it all the time, I hate my life. Now, do they really mean they hate their whole life? No, but
No,
they
they
hate
hate
that
that
moment
moment.
enough to say, I hate my life. Yeah, they hate that moment, but it feels like I hate my life at the moment, right?
Right. Oh, well, and there's another one that popped in my head when you were talking that never really occurred to me until you actually told me about it years ago. And it just, from that point on, I looked at it differently. And for me, it was also adrenaline, right? It was that risk taking behavior. It was
Yeah,
me doing really stupid things on motorcycles and stuff like that, even though I knew it was harmful potentially for me.
right,
I was doing it anyways, and I almost couldn't stop. Like, I was so,
right.
I needed it so much. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you 100% that we as a society, man, we don't seem to push healthy coping stuff very much.
Right.
It's such a normal thing. I mean, how many people have heard this? Right, the two things that I'm going to say, two phrases that I guarantee you everybody listening has heard. Shaw, you're not even in this business with us as far as the drug and alcohol, so you're a good control group here. Tell me if you've heard these phrases.
Okay.
Number one, don't even talk to me unless I've had my coffee.
Yeah.
You've heard that one, right? And the second one is, oh, I can't wait till I get home and have either a glass of wine or a beer.
Yeah.
Like, oh, just I got to get home and I can't wait to go home and do this.
I need a
So,
drink.
like, yeah, exactly. Well, it just
Right.
depends.
Right.
Depends
I
on
heard
which.
it that way, but I get what you
It depends on where you're coming from, right? Some people want a glass of wine. Usually, the fellas want some sort of beer at the end of the night. Like, whatever your
gotta
particular
go to the
vice
store and
might
grab
be.
that 40.
Yeah,
Yeah,
whatever your
but that's what
personal
we promote.
medication is.
Yeah, that's what we promote, right? We watch movies and TV shows, and it's always. Have you ever noticed that they really normalize that? Right? Like,
Yeah,
if you're watching a show and it's about a problem, like Louis, I think you mentioned one time on a what was it, Traffic, where their guys were talking about how much of a problem cocaine is as they're sitting there drinking their drinks.
yeah,
So, like,
yeah.
it'll be a conversation where people are actively discussing a problem or an
Right.
issue, but then say, I want to go home and do this. So it's like overlooked as an issue, even though it's a real issue. Like, if your coping skills at the end of the day is to come home and drink, or you can't, I'm gonna say the
Right.
coffee thing. If you're a horrible human being until you have caffeine, you should probably look into that. Like, that's self-medicating. There's a problem there that you're not really looking into.
Right, right. Well, and the thing is if it's working for you, it's working for you. And for most people, look, in reality, for most people, whatever self-medicating they're doing, it's working enough. Like, is
Right.
it working perfectly? Like, is it getting you where you want to get in life, or whatever? Well, maybe it's just not noticeably hindering you from getting where you want to get to in your life. You know what I mean? And I guess that's the most important part, right? It's not noticeable that it's actually being disruptive in your life. And to some people, it's so noticeably disruptive that they quit using.
Yeah.
And there are those of us that have experienced some sort of disruption. We say, you know what, that needs to be gone altogether, so that I can make sure that I get the other things in my life. Now, for me personally, through self-medicating, I was convinced that I did that stuff because it made me feel good. And then the medication part in my own head was I just want the world to shut up. I just don't want to hear it, right? And if I don't want to listen to you, and I don't want to hear anyone nagging, and I don't want to hear the world complaining, and I don't want to feel like crap, and I use something and it works, why wouldn't I do it more? Of course I'm going to do it more. And I'm going to do it again and again and again. And that's really the biggest fear of using anything, right? Like, all of us that have had children. Shaw, you have kids, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the biggest fears is two. Okay. And how old are your kids, Shaw?
I got a 4-year-old and a 9-year-old. Yeah,
They're
Okay,
still
so
young.
4 and 9, relatively young. So yeah, well,
and they
9 is when
obese.
I tried my alcohol. Yeah, so 9 is when I tried alcohol, and I started drinking. So, if you look at, these kids, you're thinking, all right, you're going to feel discomfort. Now, Shaw, if when Trinity said teaching coping skills, just think of that for a second. Like, where are they supposed to learn coping skills? How are they actually going to learn coping skills? Like, where and how?
And that's a good question. Because sometimes when I think back,
Yeah.
and as my daughter just went through some stuff this weekend, all I could do was just grab her and say, "It's gonna be all right. We got this." That's all I could say. I didn't know
Right.
what else to do. I
Right.
didn't know what else to go because I know if I start something, it's gonna be like, okay, well, let's go get some ice cream because you sad. Now every time she gets sad or frustrated
Mm.
about something, she got to go get ice cream, and I don't want to create that type of environment.
Right. Right. Well, I mean, and that's the thing, right? Is because when you talk about coping skills, you're talking about how to cope with uncomfortable feelings and
Uh huh.
emotions. But in reality, we struggle with coping with excitement and pleasure too. We struggle with coping
Yep.
with how do you reward, right? So like if you do well, aren't you supposed to reward yourself with something like that? I mean, that's what like you said Trinity earlier, the movies, the TV, the commercials, that's what it's all about,
Yeah,
right?
dude, that was one of the biggest things, right? When I was doing more physical training than I currently am.
Mhm.
When
Mhm.
I was, when my plate was full with clients,
Right.
I used to always have this discussion with them where they would like have like a major weight loss victory or a major victory in life, and they wanted to reward themselves with food, right? Like they
Right.
would say, "Oh, we done good. Like let me go here and have this cheesecake or whatever it might be." And I always try to explain to them, I was, in a facetious way, I would say, "You're not a dog.
Right.
Don't reward yourself with food. Like stop." Not only that, but if you're coming to see me and you're trying to facilitate fat loss, depending on how strict your restrictions are, and that one cheesecake could potentially put you off track, right? Depending
It
on
can
what
harm
your
you.
what your
Mm.
goals are, and
Yeah.
so you're actively hurting what you're celebrating. It's this weird thing where it's
Right.
like, yeah, let me go do this to celebrate, and even in the addiction world, there's so many people that come through the the centers that we were at. The idea of not celebrating with some sort of an alcohol or some sort of a drug was like unheard of for them, and it's still true too. Like for many people who don't
Well,
yet have an addiction problem, they think that, oh, we can go
right.
get messed up today, like we had a good day. Well, I mean, there's a whole movie made from it Friday. You know what I mean?
Right.
Don't get me wrong, it's a
Right.
great movie. Wasn't exactly a good
Right.
teacher on how to handle your days off though. We do have a couple
Right.
comments real quick before we
Well,
get
no,
started.
I don't know. I don't know. It taught me not to get fired on my day off. So I don't
Yeah,
know now.
touche.
Wait a minute.
Touche. I don't know if you're the norm or the exception on that one, but a couple comments from Marissa. First one she says
Right.
is healthy coping skills are needed for everyone. If we teach them to kids when they're young, we'd have far less addiction. It's the key to prevention of
Right.
drug use and mental illness. And she followed that up with,
Right.
I think kids and even adults need to know it's okay to feel the less comfortable emotions. There's this notion that they're
Yeah.
bad, but hold on to them is worse.
Yeah. Well, it's weird because we're in this time period right now, right? In this in our today's political climate, I should say, where we're saying it's okay to not be okay, but on the same coin, when we flip it, we're also saying if I don't feel okay, it's not okay for you to exist or say what you just said to me. So you have to disappear or be completely silent. In other words, in one hand, I like it. It's okay to feel not okay. It's okay to not be okay. But you know what else is also okay? It's okay if you don't get it. It's okay if
That's a
you don't
big one.
understand it
Yeah.
and you still trigger me and you're still someone who's disrespectful, or if I find you to be disrespectful, or if I find you to be annoying, that's okay too. That's what has to be okay. It doesn't only have to be okay that I know that I'm uncomfortable or I don't feel well or I'm sad or I'm depressed or I'm struggling with something. But it's also important for me to know that it's okay that you don't get it. And that part we're not teaching. We're not teaching that part. That
No.
it's okay that other people don't get it. It's okay that you don't get that you know maybe maybe I can't smoke pot, but you can, right? Cuz to somebody they can do it and it's not a disruptor
and
at
be
all,
fine.
right?
Right.
They do it so minimal. Yeah, they do it so minimal. They just maybe they just take one hit, right? And then there's other people that they don't stop at one hit. They do it in the morning. They do it during the day. They do it at night. They do it all the time. They're always blunted. It's their entire lifestyle to the point where the paraphernalia look is everywhere, right? It's got to have this kind of car or this kind of clothing. Like they're advertising. It's like over one. It's a culture, right? So it's different. Like I like football, but I don't wear a football jersey every day. You know what I mean? That would just be ridiculous to me. What were you looking at me for,
I
Shaw?
don't
What
know,
was
Doctor.
that look for?
Football is that sport. Now I wear a football jersey every day, but it's just a jersey. But I understand where you're coming from, though.
Yeah, well, but you're in that culture then. That's the culture you choose, right?
Yeah.
But that's not a norm. Not everybody that loves football wears jerseys every day.
Right.
And so the normal everyday person likes something, but they don't look like what they like. They don't dress like everything that they like. It's like for instance, when I was a kid and I listened to a lot of rock music back when I was a kid, and what was popular was concert T-shirts. That was just a popular thing. So of course I would have my Ozzy Osbourne shirt, my Led Zeppelin shirt, and all that stuff because that was the time, right? Those early '80s, that's what you did. From late '70s to early '80s, that's what you did. But as I got older, it doesn't mean I stopped listening to music. I still listen to that music, but I don't wear the shirts. Every concert I go to, I don't buy a shirt at the concerts that I go to anymore. Why would I do that? I don't care. You know what I mean? It's that kind of stuff. You don't have to, it doesn't overwhelm you. It doesn't become too much part of your life. And so there's a difference between I do something because I enjoy it and I do it and I'm overwhelmed by it. It's everything to me. I identify as it only. And it just becomes more of who I am than, it owns me more than I own it. Put it that way. Like if I'm abusing you, I'm hitting you, right, Trinity? If I'm abusing you, Trinity, I'm the one hitting you. But if you're abusing me, that's different. Then I'm a victim of it. And that's how I look at it. Like when you start having problems with drugs or alcohol, it starts abusing you, it starts hurting you. Yeah, you may think you're in control with it, but it starts damaging your relationships. It starts telling you don't have to go to work when you should go to work. Or if you do go to work, it tells you to get high before work or during work. It tells you to play games with work. It tells you to take risks at work that you wouldn't normally take, even though work is important to you. It just does that to your work. It does that to your relationships. It does that to a lot of parts of your life. And so even though you began using it early on for one purpose, as you do it over time, because it's not sustainable, because it does have tolerance, you start taking risks that you probably normally wouldn't take. Sometimes, if that's you got to take a look at it. Now, if it stays as minimal as it did from the beginning, you're not the one we're talking about today.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, I think people self-medicate oftentimes without even realizing it. If I'm honest with you, like I don't think it's come to my attention, anyways, over the years. I don't think the average everyday individual really pays attention and focuses that much on their day-to-day behavior. I think a lot of people think, as you just were alluding to, if I'm still able to kind of function with my life and kind of, I'm not losing my job, I'm not fighting with anybody, I'm just kind of getting through, then it's not a problem. And I think that's part of the problem is some of these things can go by unnoticed for so long that you don't even recognize poor coping skills until it's too late sometimes. Like you were mentioning the food part, right? You were onto something in the sense of, nobody goes to bed and wakes up the next day 80, 90 pounds heavier. It just doesn't happen. It comes on 5 pounds a year, 10 pounds a year. And then, but that's a huge killer in our world, in today's world. Like a lot of people die on a daily basis from coronary artery disease or the metabolic syndrome, which gives you all sorts of diseases, even with COVID, right? And, the people who are at most risk of COVID were obese individuals because it's already restricting your lungs and things of that nature. And for the most part, other than any sort of pending diseases or whatnot, you kind of did that to yourself and you put yourself at more risk. And it was because at some point you never learned how to cope in a healthy way. But I do believe that too many people don't realize what they're doing every day. Like you said earlier, why'd you do it? Oh, because I liked it. No, it's because I had some trauma and I'm trying to cover it up. Like I don't think we as a society kind of promote that as a good thing to like, let me look inward and figure this out.
Well, and getting back into the learning from coping, let's all go back in our heads to kindergarten and elementary school and just ask yourself, because my memory's gone, so I don't remember it. When you talked about, or did you talk about how to deal with anxiety, depression, sadness, energy? Like energy, that's a big one. Like,
No.
do you ever remember any feedback on how to deal with energy other than shut up and sit down, like the beginning of our show says?
No, I had flashbacks when you just said shut up and sit down.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
exactly.
it just popped in.
Yeah, there was no
Didn't they
talking
just tell you
about
just shut up
no.
and sit down? Isn't that how they dealt with energy? Like,
Yeah,
so if you didn't know how, if you had energy as a kid and you're hyper or whatever, you had to get going, you had to go, you had to do something.
Ritalin.
Your brain's flying. You go, yeah, but I got a question. Wait, you're not answering my question. Wait. Shut up. That was the medication. That
Yes.
was the response. So
That was so.
how do I
Yeah,
learn
from
how to cope with it?
from an authority figure, yeah, it was always shut up, sit down. And then from peers, it was kind of the same. As a dude, we weren't really encouraged. If you talked about your feelings as a kid, the era that I grew up in, you were called something else,
You
right?
were
You weren't.
soft.
Yeah, you were soft. You were, this, that, and the other, which I won't say on there. But anybody
That's
who's
right.
my age or older understands what I'm saying to them. It was not a very nice word. It wasn't like, oh man, what a smart, great human being. No, that's not what they said. You were made fun of, and it was very clear that I needed to shut up and sit down. So we got it from both ends. From
Yeah.
authority figures, it was shut up, sit down, and from peers, it was, ooh, what's wrong with you? Don't talk like that.
Right.
From my, they was always looking for me. I was that kid that would just duck off and be doing something I ain't had no business doing. So why are you over here?
Right.
Get over here and sit down.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, instead of really trying to figure out like the curiosity, right? They would just give you that. Remember the Curious George books?
Yes.
That was their response to curiosity. And really, I mean, that for generations, the response to the curiosity of children was Curious George. Read the books.
They were
that
good
was
books,
it,
though.
right? Well, yeah, but I'm not so sure it did anything to teach you truly about curiosity. Because I can't remember not one storyline out of Curious George that is impactful to me.
No,
And yet
I
I
don't
know I
remember
read
any of
every
them.
single damn one of them. I
Yeah,
remember
I
more
don't
about
remember.
Dr. Seuss than Curious George. And Dr. Seuss had nothing to do, in my opinion, had anything to do with coping. Had everything to do with accepting of others. Like Dr. Seuss was the first one that was truly inclusive. It didn't matter what color you are, didn't matter what kind you are, didn't matter what size you are, didn't matter anything. They were all included in his books. There was no identity in Dr. Seuss's books. You know what I'm saying? So that's all that did. But Curious George, on the other hand, they had a message. It actually had a message, a really good message that I think teachers could have went further with. I think schools could have went further with. I think parents could have went further with. But I just don't remember a lesson that parents gave other than shut up and sit down. Kids are to be seen and not heard. That's
Didn't
all I remember about how to deal with energy.
But didn't Clifford the Big Red Dog kind of do that as well, if I remember correctly? Yeah. Well, I think
That's
Clifford
later
was like always
generation, so I
getting.
don't
Yeah, I
remember
think he
anything
was
about
always
Clifford.
getting into stuff, and he was always. But I don't. Same thing. I don't really remember too many lessons from that. Like,
Okay,
Yeah,
so if it
that's what I'm
wasn't
saying.
Big Bird and Oscar, the Grouch in the trash
Amen.
can, I
Exactly.
wouldn't remember.
yeah, I
Yeah.
remember those a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Mr.
And I-
Rogers' Neighborhood and
Yeah.
stuff.
I learned a lot. I learned a lot
That's
from
right. That's
Grouch.
right. Yeah.
Oscar
Yeah.
in the trash can. That was my dude.
1, 2, 3. That's all I remember.
Yeah.
But I now you mentioned a good one. You mentioned Mr. Rogers. Now that is a little bit different. I think Mr. Rogers took it to a place where other people didn't take it. Mr.
Right.
Rogers actually communicated with us as kids. He actually spoke
Yeah.
to us as kids, and then he played like a kid with us. And even though
Yeah.
that kind of individual talking in that tone and that kind of oddity that kind of he had, that'd be a little spooky around my kids, to be honest with you. As an adult, I don't know if I'd let my kid play with a guy that's talking all like that around kids, because just the way he came off. He just came off just a little interesting. But as a kid, man,
I
he
loved
was
it as a
tuned
kid.
in, man. He had us. We loved it.
Yeah.
We loved it. He had us hook, line, and sinker, man.
Yeah.
And
No, I loved it.
and like I said, he spoke to us. He told us how to deal with people. Matter of fact, you know what I do remember?
He
Tell
started
me
off
that
teaching us
you don't
how to
remember the
deal.
same lesson. He taught us how to respect people, like the mailman, the police
Uh-huh.
officer.
Yep.
Like he
Uh-huh.
taught us what the uniforms were, And when you see these uniforms, this is what they're doing by your house. This is why they're knocking at your door or coming in your neighborhood, right? Didn't he always kind of like explain their
Yep.
role?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Even
it
in that
still
time
wasn't
frame,
coping. And even though but there was some coping, the crying. Remember the little cat would like cry and tear
yes,
up and
yes,
feel lonely, and then they would go into that's so he was teaching coping. I got it. The more I think about it, he was teaching some coping skills.
He was always cool. It's a beautiful day
yeah.
in the
Can it be
neighborhood.
neighbor? No, I loved
Positive minded.
Mr.
I mean,
Rogers. Yeah,
that guy
and that
deserves
was
everything he ever got. And from right here in Winter Park, right here in Winter Park in Orlando, by the way, Rollins College.
Really?
Yep.
You know,
I didn't know that.
the other one I liked
yeah.
at that time
So
frame that
anyway,
was
so
kind of similar was Reading Rainbow.
Mhm.
Oh
Reading
yeah.
Rainbow used to teach quite a bit of things as well.
Is that the
Taught
guy
me
with the little glasses?
first couple of words.
Or
Yeah.
Yeah,
From Star Wars.
Lamar?
Lamar
Or
Burton,
Lavar, yeah.
something like that. Yeah,
Lavar or Lamar?
Lamar something,
Lavar,
yeah.
right?
I think it was Lavar
Yeah.
Livy.
Yeah. Yeah. So what I'm saying is, but what about the teachers and what about the parents? And you look, man, when you teach coping skills, you can't teach it in a way that gives me an excuse from the world. And what I like about what the older generation did do is in the older generations, they wouldn't let you blame anyone for how you're feeling and what you're doing. You still had to own up to your own feelings and what you did, right? You still did it. Like you got to own up to what you did. Then we'll deal with whatever adult hurt your feelings and what they did. Now let's go walk to your neighbor. Let's go, and they made you go confront them.
I
Let's go,
know.
and we're gonna go talk to them, and we're gonna find out if what you're saying is true. But if we go over there and I find out you did more than what you're telling me, there's gonna be a problem.
It's
So they
on.
kind of force you to take responsibility because they always called your bluff, right? They always called you on it as adults, right? So there was a different way of teaching that, but yet still, how do I deal with the internal stuff if I can't trust that you're going to get it, understand it, and not accuse me and not make me feel worse than I already feel about it? And that's the hard stuff. Like how do you talk about it? And we're still dealing with that today. Here we are in 2022, and we still don't know coping skills. A matter of fact, we're going reverse in taking responsibility of anything. We're blaming everybody else but ourselves
Yeah,
instead of personal responsibility. And we're trying to get rid of all consequences because apparently, as long as we have reasons in our minds of why we did what we did, then the consequence is irrelevant. There should be no consequence because I should be allowed to respond in that negative manner because of what happened to me before. And I don't think that's where we should go with it either, because that's not going to teach me coping skills either. All that's going to do is raise me up to be a victim. And that's where I'm really glad that my parents, no matter how many, both my parents, come from other countries, and both my parents, whenever I would come to them, and I thought I could get them, Trinity. I thought, Sean, Trinity, I thought I could tell them this is the way it is in the United States, and this is what they meant, and this is the way they're talking to me, and you don't understand because you don't know English well. You know what I mean? And then they would tell me they would never let that be an excuse. They would never let that be a reason. It has nothing to do with, this being America, about you did something and you need to own for what you did. And they never let me be a victim. My father never let me blame this country for anything. My mother never let me blame this country for anything. But in front of them, like we'd go to them, my mother would defend me. That's where you did wrong, Mom. Sometimes you defended me when I was really wrong. but in person, they would never let me be, in private, they would never let me be a victim. And I'm glad. Thank you, Mom and Dad, for doing that. Because if you would have let me feel the victim that I felt, if I would have continued to go that path, I would have stayed the racist individual that I was. Because I was an anti-white American guy as a little kid, and I tried to get my parents to understand all the pains that you guys, Trinity, were giving me, and all, and they just wouldn't buy it ever. But they were like, no. Even though now as adults, they said, no, we went through some of that stuff too, but we weren't going to let you be raised like that because that's not going to benefit you in any way. Because then you're just not going to take responsibility for your behavior. You're going to continue doing the same stupid stuff you were doing. And they were 100% right. So I'm glad they never taught me the victim mentality is what I'm saying.
yeah, I'd have to agree with that. Like my mom definitely taught me, accountability. Like she was always just think before you act kind of stuff. And when I was in the deep trouble, she would always just, what do you think? Like she would never let me get away with it.
Right.
I think part of that is because she was obviously in law enforcement. So her approach was much different maybe than some other parents, I guess. But
Right.
I'm thankful for that. Like my kids don't like that because I do the same with them now. Right now I'm going through
Right.
stuff with my son who's he's acting up a little bit at school. He's starting to kind of testosterone was starting to kind of develop in him a little bit. And
Right.
he's always he's doing something in school, popping off on somebody. And when I get on to him about it, he's like, "Yeah, but they did this." I was like, "Yeah, but the funny thing is when you come home, I'm not worried about what they did. Like I'm worried about what you did.
Right.
At the end of the day,
Yeah.
you're in control of your behavior, regardless of what they do. The old adage, the old cliche, two wrongs don't make a right. I know it's played out and sounds
Right.
silly, but it's true. But yeah,
It
I don't
really
think
is it
we do
really
that.
true?
Yes, it is.
I see that all the
I didn't
time.
say it didn't feel good. I don't say it
I'm
didn't
going,
feel good at the
I don't
moment.
want to go left. I want to go right. So
Yeah,
hey,
it feels good in the moment sometimes, but if you look back, it doesn't really solve any problems. Those problems are still there,
Right.
and sometimes they're amplified.
Right. Well, and and then you get to the age where you start finding stuff like you start drinking, you start smoking pot, you start doing stuff, whatever. Some of us, not Trinity apparently, but you start doing some of that stuff. And then what did I get? I got teachers telling me that I was doing better. Like they would reward me because I wasn't as talkative. Because all of a sudden, instead of being now I'm quiet in the back of class, just quiet, just sitting quiet. And it was like, dang, Louis, you did really good today, Louis. You stayed in your seat, you behaved. And I'm thinking, man, I'm stoned. That's why, man. I'm
if
all
you
right.
only
So
knew,
this
right?
is the way I got to be. Yeah.
Found
So
the
this
answer.
is what I
You
got to be.
only knew.
Yeah. To me, I found the answer. To me, it was like, okay, so if I get high and I go to school, it makes you less annoying. It makes me I behave more. And I just don't care. And by not caring, then I don't get upset when I don't get too sensitive to the words you say to me as a teacher or whatever. I mean, I just don't care. And by not caring, then I just need to know as soon as 3 o'clock comes, I go home anyway. So
And see, that was
I'll
the
re up at
mentality.
lunch. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? What was that?
That was the mentality. I don't care. It is what it is. So, like
I
me,
don't
I would
care.
go in the back of
I
the
don't care.
classroom and just sit there. I would just sit
Yep.
there. And you know the answer? Nope.
Right.
You told me to be quiet. You keep calling my mom, and I keep getting a whooping every day. So, this is
Yep.
the only solution that I got. So, listen, don't ask me nothing. I'm here.
See, so the coping skill you learned was just don't even respond. Just don't even try to participate.
Don't try. Don't
That
call
was
me
your
for
skill.
nothing. My answer was going to
Oh,
be the same.
Right.
No.
see, now that you
Right.
brought that up,
And me
I
neither,
know
man. I never tried to answer anything in school. Never tried to answer anything in class after that. When teachers were jerky or whatever, or I felt if I took them to be that way. And by the way, they swatted you every day in my school back
Yeah.
when I was a kid. I got hit by every teacher, every coach, everybody had the paddle. And so the way I looked at teachers is
Walking
I
in the
just looked at
hallway,
them all
you
like
did.
violent individuals. Yeah. They're all violent
Yeah.
individuals that just were taking it out on me.
Well, there's another emotional coping skill that we haven't touched on yet that
Okay.
you totally just reminded me of that I I did everybody a disservice by not mentioning it at the top of the show. But I'll
Okay.
say it now. Anger.
Yeah.
That was a big coping
Yeah.
skill for me. I'm gonna get angry. I'm gonna get violent. I'm gonna
Yeah.
get very quote unquote
Yeah.
passionate. I'm gonna be a bully. I'm gonna get really mad and angry, and I'm gonna lash out to
Yeah.
get you to stop because I can't take whatever it is that you're
Yes.
saying to me or the button that you're pushing inside of me at the moment. I don't know how to handle, so I'm gonna lash out at you and be angry and everything else. That is a massive
Yeah.
coping skill because we as dudes are not
Absolutely. Absolutely.
it's not encouraged in us to talk about our feelings, right? Like
Right.
how many dudes do you know that can mention
Right.
more than like two or three feelings, right? Happy, sad, or angry.
Right.
Like they can't
That's
they
it.
can't talk about more. And I think that that is a very dangerous coping skill, especially for men to have. And it doesn't really lead anywhere good typically because it's great for that exact moment to feel differently, but it sucks in creating connection with other people. It sucks with actually explaining how you feel and creating any sort of meaningful
Mhm.
change. It really doesn't lead anywhere good, but that is a coping skill that is all too frequent.
Right. Yep.
Yeah,
I'm still
because the
bewildered
anger,
by bewildered. I still don't know what that is. Go ahead, Shaw.
that anger leads to other things, other avenues. It leads to the game banging in life. It leads to being out with the crew on a block, just going to rob somebody just on just because.
Yep.
So yeah,
Yeah.
that anger
Yeah.
is a very you're absolutely right. It's a serious copeism that we don't talk about, especially from a male
Nope.
perspective, because we either know
Right.
100 or 0? Which one do you want? There's no in between.
Even that's celebrated, right? Even that is like
Yeah.
when you watch movies and stuff, that the person, the guy who takes matters into his own hands and goes on this like killing spree, like they're the hero of the
Yeah.
movie. Which, hey man, I'm entertained by it as well. Having said that, if you or I were
Right.
to go out there and go on a killing spree because somebody did something we didn't
Right.
like, we'd be in jail.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Or
Well,
like the Wild Wild
the
West.
Yeah.
I'll meet you at sundown,
right.
Yeah.
high noon.
Well, that happened all the time. I'll meet you at recess. I'll meet you at lunch. I'll meet you after school. I mean, that was on the daily. You know. I mean, that was, I agree with you, Trent. I'm glad you brought that up because that was definitely a coping skill because of my
Still is
personal
for some
insecurities
people.
and the anger in fighting actually was a release, and I really would not have cared if I would have lost, but I also calculated and I picked people that I knew I could win. And even when I went into fights where I thought there's no way I could win, I was so overly confident and so immediately volatile that I think I threw the other person off, and I just got all the right punches in early enough that made it impossible for them to win, or we'd get broken up before it can keep going. You know what I
We
mean?
call
Because you
it
just bah, 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 bah,
first
bah,
come,
and then
first serve.
by the time the person, there you go. By the time the person realized what the hell just how is this happening, the teachers are involved, or whatever.
Right.
You're getting broken up. But the point is yeah, a lot of times there's a lot of kids that lash out in frustration and anger, and how do we deal with that? We try to sit them down and talk to them, but some of them, it's such deep rooted stuff. There's a lot of kids with their parents in prison. There's a lot of kids that
Yeah.
comes that their kids
Yeah.
are not together, and there's a lot of kids that watch their parents fight very volatile situations at home, and so their entire upbringing is just toxic.
Well, there's a
Everything is
stigma,
violent.
too.
Everything's a problem.
Well, there's a
What?
stigma too, right? Well, first and foremost,
Mhm.
before I mention the stigma, and I recently learned this, man, but I didn't realize that for children, witnessing violence in the home actually changes the
Mhm.
neurotransmitters in your brain as well. That blew me
Mhm.
away when I read
Mhm.
that the other day. But there is a stigma, right? And the stigma that I'm talking about is what I don't think a lot of people realize is crying and anger is the same thing. It's
Mhm.
coming from the same
Yeah.
thing. It's just expressed
Right.
differently. But for some reason, there's a stigma. If you get angry and mad, it's you. You're a problem. If you're sad and
Mhm.
crying, who did something to you? Who hurt you?
Right.
To whereas, well, you should be asking the little kid that's angry the same thing. Who hurt you? Because he's hurt right now, or she's hurt.
Mhm.
They're hurt, and instead of
Right.
Verbalizing it, they're getting angry. But we have to, as a
Yeah.
society, we have to stop looking at the angry kid as they're the problem. We got to realize that that's a hurt
Right.
person hurting somebody else, and like this stigma that
I,
somehow crying is more serious or more sad or needs to be helped more than the person who's angry is just complete BS. And the way you can like look into that and tell them, telling you the truth, is these school shootings. These school shootings, they weren't crying. They were
Mhm.
angry and they took it out on people. And some of these could have been prevented had that person been caught early on and says, dude, what's wrong?
Yeah.
Let me
Right.
ask this:
And I agree with you again. Go ahead.
Does talking about somebody, joking on somebody, ranking on somebody is what we call it. Is that part of self medication as well? Because
So
I was that kid.
Yeah,
That
how we develop our sarcasm. Mhm. Right. I mean, we developed our sarcasm and getting on people, cracking on them and all that stuff. I mean, whatever. We used to do the mama jokes. We went through all that stuff. Uh, that was another way of beating somebody up, really. That was another way of making someone
Yep.
else feel small or feel horrible. And that just made us feel better, right? As long as you're not the one, being hurt that day,
Yeah.
whatever's clever.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's almost like,
right.
you watch these shows like Survivor, and people, they want to pretend as if they play different there because they're on Survivor, but they're not really like that. No, you're really like that. You're trying to believe that you're only acting like that because you're on the game Survivor. But if you notice when you watch Survivor, the people that are supposedly the weak, the inferior, the socially awkward, they're actually the most brutal on Survivor. They're actually the most rude. They're the biggest liars. They're
That
the biggest
part.
cons, and they're the most disloyal. that we are seeing now in today's culture. It's like the cool table got ran over by the nerds kind of thing, and then like they're running it in a very different way, right? Now, I'm not trying to say that the cool people were any better, but both the pendulum is bad on both swinging, right? It swings bad one way and it swings equally as bad in the opposite direction. But we watch this stuff all the time, and just like you said, Trinity, but because they're crying or because they have some sort of inferiority that's visible, then we feel for them more.
Yep.
Whereas because someone's physically superior or stronger or more athletic, even though they suffer equally, we just give them the short end and we just don't feel for them. We instead are okay with them being the bad guy and the villain. And that's not necessarily so. Like you said, like when you said anger is no different than depression. Like I used to joke that, but rather seriously, that I didn't want to go back to using. I said because I won't hurt myself. My feelings and emotions, the way they stir up in me, and I become a problem. I outwardly become a problem, not internally. Internally, yeah, I'll suffer, but I'll explode outward first. I'm more homicidal than suicidal. Does that make sense? So I hurt
Same.
others before I hurt myself. That's how I hurt myself, by hurting others. It's almost like death by cop kind of situation. I'm going to put myself in really dangerous situations, really risky situations, do very bad, horrible things to make the system attack me and come back at me. That's how I've hurt myself in the past, and I'm sure that's how I'll hurt myself in the future should I go back and do some of the same things. Whereas other people, they turtle up and they appear weaker and all that stuff. But that's the person that when they do explode, they go off. That real quiet, timid, little sad, little crying bird, that person is vicious. When that person goes off, and it's the loud, demonstrative person, that man, really, it's not as much of a problem. I'm more concerned about the real quiet, sad, crying kid, because when that kid goes off, they shoot up schools. That's what you were talking about, Trinity.
That's
and that's exactly the truth.
Yeah.
The bully never shoots up the school. The bully will beat your butt, and that's it. He beats your butt. He lets you know he's going to beat your butt. Tells you what time he's going to beat your butt. Tells you where he's going to beat your butt. It's the other kid that goes, okay, all right. They go home and they dream about you. They imagine you. They dream about killing their mother, their father, their dad, everything, and they do it all. So all those emotions are bad. We got to learn how to cope with all types of emotions, because
there's another
anger is not really about anger.
No, there's another coping skill too that I personally never really participated in, but having kids now, I'm seeing it a lot, like through like TikTok, believe it or not, and some of their friends and whatnot. But cutting, that seems to be a lot more popular these days than I was ever aware of. But cutting yourself is also a coping skill that I think is obviously horrible, and it's not going to help anything. But I think that if you're listening to this right now, that's not good for you.
Yeah, well, when you start controlling, when you're so out of control, and people have controlled you so bad, and you feel controlled by the world, and you've had some real traumatic stuff happen to you, that is one way they control their own pain. Instead of you causing the pain, they control their own pain. That deserves its own show entirely. I'm hearing music in the back. Or Shaw, are we at the end of the show? Is that why I'm hearing the music?
Yes, sir. We're down to 2 minutes left.
Oh, boy.
We got our next show coming in onto the airwaves.
What is it?
The Side Show
Tell
with
us what
all
it is,
good
Sean.
entertainment. The Side Show with all good entertainment. They're coming to your way to throw down with some good jams. That's going to be a blessing to your heart, your mind, and your soul.
Right on. All right, Shaw, do you have any final words, any parting words?
I know this is kind of tough to say. It's okay not to be okay. But don't let it sit. Express.
Right on. Thank you very much. Dharma guy.
Yeah, I would just say, as far as your day-to-day life, really look inward and ask yourself, is what I'm doing really good for me? It might feel good, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, is it really good for you? Look inward and ask yourself that question. If it isn't, then reach out, get some help.
Right on. And what I'm going to close with is, look, I know that sometimes when we first find something to use, it works in the moment. You know what I mean? Maybe what you're using helps you not feel so bad about your situation and about your life and about the parents that you have and the life you live in, your brothers and your sisters and the neighbors and that kid at school that keeps on picking on you and saying things to you and whatever. But it's not sustainable. Substances are never sustainable. Substances will eat you up from the inside worse than those people could ever hurt you, you know, because it's hurting you so bad from the inside that it changes who you are. And the problem is not who you are, it's how you're feeling and how you're dealing with it, and the stuff that's happening to you. But when you do substances, now you do something to yourself, and it starts eating you up from the inside, and you start becoming something very different, and you'll never get to know who you would have been and how you would have been. Your body has natural coping skills. Your brain has natural coping skills. That's why when you look at a baby come out of a mama in the wild, it already starts walking or flying and doing stuff very instinctually. You have some very interesting instincts that have been there for generations and generations. Don't numb them, don't melt them, and don't smoke them up. Let them just be. Get to somebody, talk to them, let them know what you're dealing with, and hopefully you can find other coping skills and other ways to deal with it. If you guys need help, 833 Now Matters. That's 833 Now Matters. Give us a call. Maybe we can help you out. Other than that, we got to get going. We got Dharma time tomorrow where we're talking about Trinity.
Imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome.
So 1 p.m. tomorrow on this Facebook channel. Same thing. Imposter syndrome with Dawn Dharma time. Adios, amigos. It's time for a taco. Goodbye.